Hello, everybody. Oh, it's here. So I'll stand on this side this time. All right. Hello, everybody. This has been a long day. We've talked about quite a lot today, and we are now ready to wrap it up and react. As Frank mentioned, I represent the Tech Field Day group that is here. I organize that. My name is Stephen Foskett. And I am joined here on stage by four most excellent comrades from the Tech Field Day community. If you haven't heard of Gestalt IT or Tech Field Day, essentially we are well, I like to say that we're cat herders sometimes. No offense, cats. But we are a group of independent folks who love technology. We write about technology, we do podcasts, we do videos, we write articles. Some of us act as analysts, some of us act as press, and that's sort of who we are and why we're here. So I personally am extremely excited about CXL technology because of the transformative aspect of it. And so I decided that I wanted to bring Tech Field Day to the CXL forum this week, and so that I could basically expose the delegates and the rest of our field day audience to what's going on here. This session is being recorded as a roundtable discussion for our Tech Field Day audience and will be posted as well along with the rest of the Tech Field Day videos on our YouTube channel. But let's get started. I'm going to have the folks here around the table introduce themselves and react to what they've heard. Craig, you're the furthest, so you get to go first.
Okay. I'm Greg Rodgers. I'm a solutions architect, and my reaction today is memory pooling is a concern, and we've seen a lot of products come in, be presented. We know it's the biggest cost part of a server. It really makes sense to optimize it, and it's probably why it was the first thing that was going to be introduced with CXL 1. We also know it's going to get a lot more exciting moving into CXL 2 and 3, but in the short term, that memory level optimization is exciting. Once we have these products, it'll be interesting to see how it affects the likes of different workloads, virtualization as opposed to tall, scalable workloads. Looking forward to seeing that.
All right, so that's your initial reaction from the day.
Hi, I'm Joey D'Antoni. I'm a principal consultant at Denny Cherry & Associates Consulting, and I write at redmondmag.com. And I think my impressions are, the memory thing is really important. I work with a lot of workloads that are really memory dependent. I do a lot of database work, but it's not just as simple as plug and play. There's optimizations that are going to need to happen at the software level to really take advantage and manage to deliver optimal performance with remote memory, because it's not just as simple as moving cold pages into the remote memory. It's going to be at the OS level. It's going to be more complicated than that for some types of software.
Girard?
Hey everyone, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Girard Kavelines. I'm an infrastructure engineer, and I'm also the founder of Tech House 570. For me, without question, I knew just a smidge about CXL prior to coming here today, and I'm still trying to digest it all, but in a good way. I know for a fact, some of my key areas are networking, security, and virtualization. So one of the big takeaways for me is how is CXL going to impact this, right? I know in my day-to-day operations, what we see, especially to go to Joey's point, from a virtualization aspect, what CXL can do. So I'm excited to see how I could take a lot of these changes and maybe, how they're going to impact the industry overall, especially in those particular key areas for me. Definitely excited, want to learn a little more, and I'm just digesting it all. It's a lot, and it's a great time, so I'm excited to be up here.
And I'm Enrico Signoretti, and principal analyst for data storage at Gigahome. And I'm really excited about everything that I learned today. I was already aware about, parts of the roadmap, not actually everything. So the memory pooling is the first thing, but actually the resource pooling in general will change the way enterprises will design their data centers. Now that, there is a little bit of reconsideration also on we are designing our strategy for the future about multi-cloud, having these hybrid cloud approaches that are changing. This will really change how the data center will be designed, managed, updated over time. So it's very evolutionary from this point of view. So it changed the way we think about the data center.
And I shared my thoughts earlier on the panel with a number of the companies that are working here, but I agree that, to be honest, I feel like the CXL product vendors are maybe selling this technology a little short. I feel like you don't want to get out ahead of your skis when you're talking about things, but quite frankly, this is an exciting and technological change, and I think that it will have a lot of unexpected changes to overall systems architecture. As I mentioned earlier, I think the CPU vendors are going to change their strategy around data center CPUs. I think the server vendors are going to change their strategy around what servers look like and what servers are. I think that the rest of the stack is going to have an impact as well. And I hear a lot today from the folks in this room about sort of the practical applications, the next generation technologies that they're working on. But I would encourage you all to maybe think about the ways in which this technology can go further than that, can be more than memory pooling and resource sharing, and get excited about it, because there's a lot happening here. So I want to pose the next point to the folks here. You've seen a lot of presentations from a lot of companies today. Was there a presentation that impacted you quite a lot? And if you don't want to chime in, that's fine, but does anyone want to jump in with one that did a particularly good job?
I did, and again, it's probably going to be biased, but I really loved, it was earlier on with Samike and Jeff from Broadcom, when they were really talking about how CXL is going to help from a server and a switching standpoint, right? And they were talking really heavily, and where I zoned in, I felt the most was port-based routing. Because, again, one of the key areas for me is, we look at current architecture, and we look at, from a server and networking standpoint, how that's going to change, be it, we're going to have all these different components moving, so how do we take how we already have protocols set in place. How does CXL implement that, and how does that change that, but in a better way? And how do we make it more efficient? So I really zoned in on that. I'm still doing a lot of research on it, because it's just something I'm still wrapping my head around. It's pretty great.
Yep.
I feel like more generally, there were 3 or 4 talks I think that really talked about, and performance is one of my passions. So I think looking at system performance and looking at the impact of system performance, and then beyond that, the optimizations that can be made at the OS level, and even maybe possibly lower or further up the stack, whether it be virtualization or other types of software, database engines, et cetera, to reduce the performance impact and really just make it almost seamlessly to access remote memory. And I think that's going to drive a lot of different innovations in both cloud and enterprise solutions.
I like the Intel presentation this morning about the general overview of the direction data centers will be going, and that long-term vision of composable racks. As a solutions architect within the infrastructure space, we're going to have to pivot and adapt how we compose these racks in the future. So it's an interesting glimpse into the future to see how that's going to happen.
Well, I have to say that I like all of it, and no, for 2 reasons. One is, the more, especially at the very beginning, we had, the educational part. Okay, so where we are going and everything, and then in the second part of the day, we saw real products, so that are developed. There is, ecosystem that is growing. So I think that that was also, from my point of view, the application of the, of the first part that was, a little bit, maybe too much theory somehow, but it was, very, a brilliant way to put things together.
Yeah. And I mean, as for me, I mean, the thing that I was looking forward to the most was the presentations from the companies like Meta and Uber, telling us how they're working this into their overall strategy. I feel like that they deserve a real pat on the back for coming in here and kind of revealing how this technology can be used in their architectures. So that really was great. How about the technology itself? Maybe you had a preconceived notion. What changed your mind? Did anything change your mind? Do you have any new ideas? I mean, I'll start off actually myself to kick things off with what Girard was saying. I hadn't really thought about the implication and that trade-off between Ethernet and CXL until we had these discussions today. So that was a big highlight for me. Anybody else?
It was interesting seeing what Memverge were doing, you know, further driving optimizations, you know, beyond the hardware layer, you know, into the software layer. It was nice to see that it can work in tandem, you know, to get the most out of the hardware available. Memory tiering is going to bring new models of efficiency, you know, we've always looked at putting the right workloads in the right storage. Now we're looking at putting the right workloads in the right RAM. It's an interesting twist. Has a new layer of complexity, obviously, but there's operational efficiencies to be gained.
Well, from my point of view, I mean, maybe I stole your moment, but I had this idea today that, you know, the roadmap is there. There are, you know, 4 or 5 years roadmap. What I missed today is the orchestration part, because of course, you know, hyperscalers have people, they understand their problems, they can go deeper as much as they want, and they can build all the orchestration for this new technology to share, to manage these resources. But actually, if I have to translate this to the enterprise, yes, maybe they will take advantage of API, but they can't build their orchestrator. So I think that, you know, the next step is to understand where and how this layer will fit in the overall architecture for CXL.
Yeah, Enrico and I had this discussion over lunch, and I think a place where you could see innovation is maybe at the hypervisor, maybe even above the hypervisor, to do that sort of high-level data center orchestration, because like the cloud providers have schedulers and pretty intelligent solutions about where they place workloads and things like that, but that sort of thing doesn't really exist as a product at the enterprise level.
So looking to the future, this is one of the things that we talk about a lot with the Tech Field Day experience, with the Tech Field Day delegate panels. We look at this, we absorb it. You know, since we're not really in the industry, we don't necessarily know what the roadmaps are for these things, and we're smart enough not to guess about what things are going to happen next. But we can sort of see where this goes. And my next question for the panel is, you know, where will this go? How will this change overall architecture, either in the cloud or in data centers, or somewhere else? I don't know. You want to speculate on that?
I'll start. In the cloud, I think what you'll see is a broader variety of SKUs that are better fit. More examples. Obviously, some of that's going to come in infrastructure as a service, but it's also going to mean cloud vendors are going to be able to be more flexible on their platform as a service offerings and offer just, I think, a broader range of configurations to better serve customers.
I think that in general, if I look at the enterprise today, and if I look at the past, I mean, do you remember the blade servers? This kind of, you know, system that never worked actually because they were absolutely useless. I mean, they didn't do anything more than you know, pizza box.
I'm sorry if any of you worked in the blade server industry.
But no, I mean, so they were complex. They were, you know, resources were not where they supposed to be, etc., etc. Now with this technology, you can think in 5-6 years, really something that will work finally. So you have these small compute units, and then all the resources organized in, you know, trays or whatever they will be called in the future, with your old GPUs, FPGAs, accelerator of any kind, even probably NICs, any sort of connectivity, and then just you pull your sources. Again, the orchestration will be the key.
Yeah.
I mean, that's definitely to segue and pull off of that is, I love that CXL, not just from the software, but from the hardware perspective, right? You're going to be creating hardware that you're creating more hot swappable options. So instead of having to worry about having, a max on how many physical DIMMs you have, you can just keep adding or removing and pulling back and forth, which is good because especially having additional NICs. I mean, it's changing the way we do these things. That's why if you start at the bottom, at least me, I start at the bottom and just look at it. It's like a layer, right? The more layers you have, and you start pulling them away, then you can get to all the good stuff, get to the easy stuff, and how we can deploy that and be more efficient and get the most out of it.
I think the hyperscalers will obviously adopt quickly, and we'll have the in-house teams to be able to leverage the benefits of CXL. But at the consumer side, you'll see virtual machines offering cheaper tiers of RAM. They'll get a lot of uses out of it at that size. On the server architecture side, we're not going to see anything really significant outside of memory expansion within the next few years, but in potentially 5 years' time, when you're looking at composable racks, it's going to let you really drive efficiency at the rack level. If you're architecting a solution, you go in, how much storage you need, how much RAM, how much CPU cores, then you have to refactor that into, 1, 2, or 4 U servers. That won't be the case now. It'll be, I need this amount of trays of RAM, this amount of trays of disks, this amount of trays of GPUs. So it's exciting, to see the industry going that way.
Do you think there's still going to be discs then? Pardon? You think there's still going to be discs then?
Yeah. Well, hopefully they're gone.
Okay. Oh, killing me. By the way, if anybody has any questions, there are the microphones set up here, and we would be happy to entertain those as well. We had a few before. One of the things that Joey tweeted out was about the timeline for this stuff. I think that was a good observation. Tell us, when is this going to happen?
Wait, remind me what I tweeted.
Or maybe that was Ken. Yeah, Ken's giving me a look. So essentially, I guess it was refreshing to see some of the honest timeline mentioned here. That although CXL3 spec is done, products aren't going to be coming for a couple more years.
Yeah, I that's nice to see in the honesty. And the nice thing about a timeline being that long, it gives platforms time to adapt software to meet those hardware goals.
Don't rush it. I think any one of us could agree, like any good product, for me anyway, the way I approach it or look at it, the longer it has to bake, the longer you can work out the bugs, the kinks before it goes to market. Because this way, again, you can't be in a situation where it's 2, 3 in the morning and you've deployed this solution and you don't really have the support. Not just so let's look at it from two perspectives. The product is still having its issues, and then the support may not be ready to handle it. Which again, that's a very small fraction. It happens. So take time. The longer, the better.
Yeah, because I mean, honestly, the memory expansion is going to be here very quickly. Yeah. But some of these other capabilities, it's actually nice to see the vendors working with FPGAs to prove things out and tweak and tune and make sure that things work right before trying to deploy them. We have a question.
A comment, perhaps. Although CXL 3.0 has just been released, CXL 1.0 was released several years ago, and CXL specification is backward compatible. So people who are building parts now, they can pick and choose which features they want to do. They don't need to do all of CXL 3.0. So you're correct that, the full set of CXL 3.0 will take several years, but you can start deploying things right now, and they're all 3.0 compliant. They might not have any of the features of 3.0, but they're 3.0 compliant because 3.0 is backward compatible.
And I'm really glad to hear that the consortium and the developers are aiming for that, because that's the hallmark of PCI Express has been wonderful compatibility between generations, and it's great to see that in CXL as well.
Basically, I'm Siamak Tavalai, president of CXL consortium. So our recommendation is not wait. There's a lot of good pieces within the already released specifications, deploy whatever makes sense to you guys as suppliers and you guys as consumers. Don't wait. We all need to do crawl, walk, run. We learn from it, and then as you guys suggested, we build more and more robust things based on them, but we have to build something first. We have to go all the way, go through the full qualification cycle. Even on simpler devices, we learn a lot.
Well, you're totally right. The only problem is that today this technology is perfect fit for the hyperscalers, and enterprises, I mean, even the largest enterprises, just the memory option. So the memory pooling is maybe not enough to justify a big change, while the educational part, the introduction of the technology is important today, so that the next generation of their data center will take advantage of this technology. Enterprises are not as quick in the change as hyperscalers. Hyperscalers have total control of the stack. If they decide we have to do this because we need the advantage, we need to take advantage of this technology, they can switch and start developing the technology. Enterprises are way smaller than that, slower than that, sorry.
Well, yeah, and it directly contributes to the profit margin of the hyperscaler as opposed to the enterprise.
Yes.
And of course, the enterprises have to make sure that their system vendors are implementing these technologies and delivering products and having supportable products and so on. And they're not quite as agile, as you say, as the hyperscalers. So.
One point I wanted to mention around the having to wait for 3.0. There is a perception that is not correct that 3.0 implies you're doing 64 gig PAM4 physical layer. Those are not required. You can do 3.0 at 32 gig, and for a lot of people, for a lot of vendors rather, that may be a very interesting place to go, because you're not having to wait on the Blackmagic physical layer doing all of the magic, getting in the new process and all that other stuff that might take more time than you want. So doing it in 32 gig, even if you're not deploying it, would allow you to get a lot of the software and system architecture things out of the way.
Yeah, spoken by one of the wizards, by the way, deploying the Blackmagic over there, developing the Blackmagic.
Steve, I have a comment.
Yeah. Oh, you need a microphone. I'm pretending to be Frank, and he's pretending to be me.
I had to take my jacket off because I would like to speak on behalf of me as a Google guy, not
Oh, okay.
CXL president guy.
All right. Well, honestly, Frank, I'm sorry to say this, but customers come first.
Oh, sorry. Just because it is follow-up to the earlier question about enterprise versus hyperscale. Hyperscalers would love to introduce enterprise class systems into a data center. So finding off-the-shelf systems that just work is wonderful for hyperscalers. Enterprise can produce some of the type of things that hyperscalers are not thinking about. So if CXL is brand new technology and perhaps it has not proven itself at the high volume, enterprise can develop servers based on niche products that they wish and introduce it to hyperscalers, and as long as they provide value and as long as they follow the security and management, those type of requirements that eventually fit them into Azure or Google Cloud or AWS, it's very likely those guys will be happy to receive the parts. So that's how we can say enterprise and edge and hyperscalers are working together. It's kind of hard to say these days something is total dichotomy of it is enterprise or hyperscale.
Yeah, and going back to Enrico's point is, I would suggest to that there's not just hyperscale and enterprise. I think what we're seeing, we've been selling memory virtualization now for a couple of years, is there's big memory workloads. And they live in the cloud or they live in on-prem. EDA, animation, visual effects, all types of simulations for different types of analytics. And the customers we're talking to are very interested in POCs, and they want to kick the tires as soon as they can. They would love to get their hands on some of these CXL servers and start with the expansion card, put their workloads down on it, and go from there.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that in my opinion, the memory expansion workload or use case is a very powerful one because it is sort of a universal and approachable product. It's basically, I have this problem, I need more memory. This product gets me more memory. Let's do that, and it gets people on ramp. You know, it provides a nice on ramp into CXL. Whereas if you went out of the gate with switches and rack scale and disaggregation, it's a little more scary. But memory expansion, I think, seems a little less scary, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I've been doing is I've been asking our prospects and our customers this question: what would you do if you had a petabyte of memory? And I've learned that, like in the EDA space, I have a great video of a genomicist going, "Oh my God, we could just..." And what it leads to is this word collaboration. So I think in the EDA space, in the genomic space, and in the animation space, they have this. They believe that there's this holy grail of having petabyte data sets all sitting in memory, and they can all collaborate on it.
We got another.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So speculation is always a good thing, especially because it spurs ideas. One of the questions I have about this technology of CXL is impacting the enterprise, and the last 5 to 6 years you've seen HCI take off. I think this could be the death knell for HCI if you design it correctly, because I don't think there's a reason for HCI with the faster interconnects like this. Thoughts?
What do you think? Hyperconverged?
Well, I mean, a few years ago, when we started seeing in the composability area all these new startups, and we thought about, this is the perfect companion for hyperconvergence, because, in the end, they solve 2 problems, even if they look the same problem. I mean, one is resource utilization, and the other one is, having these small virtual machines that are more for the CPU than for the RAM or anything else. So, in the end, I think it's not. I mean, probably the future will be to have a very highly composable infrastructure, and on top of it, you will keep the hypervisors and all the other technology that they are using today. So I don't think that there will be a change on the upper layers. I mean, we have only to hope at this point that all this technology in the upper layers will be able to use composability or disaggregated resources. I don't even know yet how we will define. I mean, composability was a good term a few years ago, but some marketing guys ruined it all. So I don't know if the industry will choose to use composability again.
You can always count on marketing guys to co-opt a term for something they don't do to mean what they do. It happens all the time.
I do think that, especially looking forward with I/O acceleration happening more and more, I think that could be something that really limits because I think ultimately you're limited by a lot of things on the I/O capacity of a hyperconverged infrastructure. And I think if you have the capability to do these massive amounts of I/O with I/O acceleration and more memory, that's going to be pretty defeating to an HCI type solution, unless other things change that I'm not aware of.
Yeah, and one of the biggest challenges for hyperconvergence is the fact that you usually have uniform and finite fixed resources that you can deploy, and so that led us to this sort of asymmetric hyperconvergence and all this sort of thing. I think that this could open the door and really kind of solve that challenge. So one of the things I want to get to before we finish here is, we come, again, we're not in the industry and we're not exposed to this stuff all the time. We don't always know. What are the things that could go wrong from your perspective, not necessarily from the perspective of the industry? As sort of somebody who represents the IT architects out there and the people who might be thinking about embracing this technology, what can go wrong?
I see 2 main things that could go wrong. One is around the physical cabling for all these new external devices, and there's going to have to be a lot of bandwidth going through them. They're going to be thick, chunky cables, connectors, so the physical cabling aspect.
Or little fibers.
The second aspect to see is this small thing called security. How are we going to secure this? This is a whole new attack surface, and I'm not seeing any real information out there around securing this and baking it into enterprise standards around security.
Craig makes two excellent points. I'm going to make one slightly different one. I think it's going to take a while for a lot of software platforms to adapt. We still run into issues where we see, in my regular job, where we see NUMA misconfigurations causing performance issues. And NUMA's existed for as long as I can remember now. So I think something that's this big of a paradigm shift in the way systems are allocated, if a specific software or OS isn't optimized, you saw in some, I think it was Meta's thing today, where if with that optimization, there was like a 15 or 20% performance degradation from accessing remote memory. Those are things that are going to get noticed in systems if they're not optimized for it.
Yeah, I think, if you want to pull everything together, this is all about user experience. I mean, the cabling, the security, the orchestration, everything. So if you have a fully backed product and any user will be able to use it, then yes, I mean, this will be a great success. If it becomes complicated, especially on the security side, because, you know, you're accessing memory from other parts of, you know, this fabric. And, you know, we see still today bugs in the CPUs that create any sort of issue, potential issue.
Yeah, and how would that work with something like enclaves, right? Yeah, where you had encryption.
Anything? Okay. Go ahead.
I feel like just to pile on with that, it's more of the trickle-down effect too, right? Like we can look at security, we look at cabling, we look at the whole experience, but what else can it trickle down to? What else? Again, it goes back to what I was saying, the layers, you know? If it starts at one, and then what happens is, okay, well, how do we secure it, you know? From a hardware thing, and I try to be an optimist. I'm always one of those people, if you think something's going to go wrong, chances are it could. I always try to look at it, well, cabling, maybe we could, you know, run it through the channels a little better. Maybe we could, but there's still always that small margin of error. So I think it's just being diligent. For me, I mean, those of you guys really hit all the topics.
And maybe the industry has this dealt with. Maybe these are things to communicate next, you know, that this is not a problem for one reason or another. I suspect that security is one of the things that's on the roadmap.
Security's on every roadmap.
So we have a question here.
Yeah, actually my question was about security, what you guys thought about security. But I did have another question about fault tolerance. What do you guys think about single points of failure? You all mentioned pooling and, you know, that's gonna be big too, I think.
Yeah, this does theoretically create a bigger blast radius if there is a failure.
Well, actually, CXL 3, the first presentation that we saw this morning has multipathing, right? So potentially, it will be all about best practices in a few years from now. So you have to implement multiple switches, you have to implement multiple paths, and then you can reach your sources. And of course, you can have issues in the single resource pool. But actually, I mean, I hope that everything will be designed in a way that makes sense. I mean,
so you're not worried about a single point of failure?
Well,
you feel like they'll take care of it?
Well, on a highly available.
I hope so. I mean, so we are in 2022 now, and this technology is, you know, developed now. So enterprises want no single point of failures.
Yeah, like just I would like to. I'd like to believe that, you know, in addition to from the hardware standpoint with everything with CXL, they're also working with the manufacturers who design these racks, okay? Not just from an internal but an external standpoint on how to provide better cooling. However that may be, for again, running those cables, having that additional hardware to run and optimize the performance.
Well, and for a highly available system, I would think you wouldn't have a single instance of your application tied to a single rack of hardware. So yeah, there is some worry about high availability on the individual host, but a host failure shouldn't take down an application anyway, if it's designed to be highly available.
Wow. I never thought I would sit on a panel of enterprise tech people who are not worried about points of failure. Okay. Does that answer it? You okay? All right. Thank you.
So one quick question. So NUMA crossings and NUMA performance concerns that came up, actually, from my own experience at VMware, I mean, beyond a certain threshold, actually NUMA, accessing NUMA, crossing NUMA boundaries and having too many crossings, it is an issue, and we are seeing degradations. So it looks like you all agree that, you know, there has to be some ways to sort of understand what is that threshold and, you know, sort of do more research on that, right?
Yeah, because this is essentially extreme NUMA, right?
May I add a comment?
Yeah. Oh, there he is.
How many gallons of milk do you have in your refrigerator? That's direct access. Yeah, you want it late at night, you have it. You have a party now. How many buckets of ice cream do you have in your refrigerator? Will it serve everybody? No, you have to go to the grocery store and get it, but that's okay. That's the same concept here. CXL provides more memory, could be part of the pool, because in the grocery store, anybody has access to it as long as they go buy it. It's not in everybody's pantry or anybody's refrigerator. It is available if you ever need it, but you do know that you have to go maybe a mile walk to get it, but that's okay. You plan on it. It works. And that's the concept of memory tiering concept. You do have access to local memory at FAST. You just put all of the hot pages there. But if you have bulk, you have lots of guests coming, then just go to the grocery store and get it. You fill the refrigerator ahead of them showing up, right? Because once they show up, they want a drink, right? So you do that. So that's the memory tiering concept, right? Does it work? Guys? Works? Okay, maybe. Dan doesn't agree all the way.
All right. We got another comment over here.
I just had to say about the security aspects. Like, so we do support IDE, the port to port this encryption, and then we support secure boot, root of trust, and the entire chain of trust. So it is as good as it like gets. And then we have the best practices out of like here at OCP, and then Microsoft and AMD, NVIDIA, everybody launched the Cleopatra. So that's going to be used. So I think its security will be really robust.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for that clarification. I just got a sign from the side that we have to wrap. So let's just takeaways. Does anyone have any particular key takeaways that they want to mention here before we go?
CXL is coming.
Yep.
That was going to be mine. It's definitely going to happen, and it's real.
Yep.
I'll keep it short. Embrace change. Should put that up. Embrace change, because it's easy to look at it from a technological standpoint, business operations. We all have the opportunity, in no matter what role we are, is to be the bridge and the liaison to show the propositional value, not just in the solution, but how we frame it. So embrace change. It's not always bad, and it's for the better.
Any final words?
Yeah, I mean, this is a revolution. This is a huge change for everybody in the, that is designing IT infrastructures. And I'm pretty sure that it will be embraced by enterprises in the cloud, of course, but also at the edge. I was thinking today that we could have some really neat, applications for this technology. So it's really coming.
Yeah, rack scale architecture at the edge is actually a really exciting technology concept, and I hope that you're all working on that. Well, I appreciate this. One of the takeaway for me is the same charge that I gave in the New York keynote last week, which is I would just challenge everyone in the industry, whether they're consumers of the technology, enthusiasts about the technology, developers of the technology, to embrace interoperability and standardization to make sure that this actually works together. Because if there's one thing that can kill promising technologies, it's proprietary things that don't work together and aren't proven to work together and aren't well supported. So that's the thing that really has to be done. And I'm really thrilled to see all these names on this list and the aggressive work from the CXL consortium to make sure that that is going to happen, because that's what could kill it and that's what will make it work. So let's wrap up. Thank you for doing this. Again, we're going to be doing a podcast where we talk about this with companies in the industry. So Craig is going to be co-hosting with me, along with Nathan Bennett, another one of our delegates. We would love to have you all on that. It's been launched at Utilizing Tech. You can find Utilizing CXL in your favorite podcast app, and you'll find the episodes on YouTube as well. The first one already came out. The next one's going out on Monday. The next one's on Monday after that, and so on. So we'll be doing a weekly discussion about sort of how CXL is going to get real. So let's all keep connected and keep the conversation going. And thank you very much for allowing us to be the anchorman here at the CXL Forum, Frank. And thank you for organizing this. It's been a really great event.
Thank you, everyone.
Yep.